So I'll just show you one of the location, and then we're going to move on to our next thing to discuss. So the inside here, so we're starting to get, this is another artist who joined us,
John Lauren.
Late, relatively. We'd done some work in this bookshop area. And in the bookshop, you know, this starts to get more specific, where we're now getting production assets. So things that we would actually use in the film itself. Some of the pieces we've seen were inspirational, some were production assets. So the cliffside was a production asset that we put the characters on. Some were just more evocative. This was very much, and John is built for this. He's really good at tying spaces down. Again, very quickly, technically speaking, we had two types of spaces that we built. So we had kind of environment, exterior, stuff like this, and then interiors that were a series of cards. And as we get to Joel, we'll talk more about that, where, like this room, we would just make a card of this wall, a card of that wall, a box, if you will, and a card for the floor. And we would just prop that up like a little house of cards inside After Effects or whatever, and we could cheat that it felt like we were in that room. Okay, so that was one way that we accomplished that. That involves having to choose perspective. So we chose that you as an audience in this room would only be over here by the desk. So the shelves would kind of go away from you. Do you see how that, if I tried to move us over to the other side of the room, the light and the shelves don't work, right? So it's painting to this, which is different than a lot of productions that, in CGI certainly, where the story department actually drove where the camera would sit. So the story department did their job first, and then the paint department came back and said, okay, we're gonna build this environment. Now, it's restrictive because we can't really move very much, as Joel knows. But then the artist would deliver all that stuff in layers so that we could have, we could work a character between things.
Can I just say about this particular piece? John and I definitely talked extensively about this environment and going back and forth and making sure the art direction was on point, and then realizing in the final short that a spiral staircase, which was probably one of the most difficult, like, single-dimensional painting tasks of the whole project and his career to that point, shows up in the short. Did we even cheat it in just so that we could justify the work?
It's
that
like
went
maybe
into
one shot.
Yeah, there's one shot with a spiral staircase, and it's like that, and it's gone. And for John, that was hours of like, okay, the stairs go round. You know,
But he did work this floor. This is the floor that you see Lily sitting on, which did get used as it was built. This one is built, you know, as like a flat, so it doesn't necessarily have perspective built into it, so we can place it in where we want to in 3D. All right, so we made it through this part of production. This is really all that design, kind of thinking about how the spaces need to feel, and then we had to turn our sights towards the actual execution. Now we're going to start making production assets, making the thing, and so we have a whole other series of choices that involve what we feel about those spaces, right? And this is where, in traditional production for animated stuff, things get cold, right? This is where things start to kind of lose a lot of this. So one of the impetuses for us on this project early on was a few of us had worked for studios, and in large studios, when you finish a film, you get a really big art of book, which is awesome. And we often found ourselves enjoying the art in the art of book more than the final movie, right? Like, could we have stopped here? Like back in the day. I mean, if you look at some of the art for Snow White or Bambi, it is what was on the screen, right? But in CGI, it's not that way, right? There's evocative work here, and then it has to go through the computer, and it becomes somewhat antiseptic. So we were determined to try to keep that coming. There's a lot of technology fighting us at this point in our journey. Before we get into execution, I'm going to pause for like maybe 2 or 3 questions on design influence. So if you have questions on design, let's talk about that briefly. We truck along here, everybody? Yeah?
Were there any like painters, anybody you look to for visual and style inspiration?
No, it's all original.
yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot actually. What was the one we pointed to a lot? I mean, we did Rockefeller for the kids. We talked about hair and that sort of stuff.
That was definitely Tom's, like, Tom loved to bring Rockefeller back into it.
Yeah, Rockefeller kept showing up. Who was the dude?
For me, N.C. Wyeth for directing the backgrounds was a big one. And if you guys aren't familiar with the paintings of N.C. Wyeth, he was like a classical American adventure illustrator. He is just incredible for evoking a feeling with like a very few brushstrokes and a lot of energy. And there's just like such the windswept, some of the most quintessential, like Robin Hood, Ivanhoe, Treasure Island, like all these like classic adventure story paintings are NCYF. And one of the things he does, all of them are super narratively driven. So if the illustration is about the feeling of like a front line charging into battle, that's what's in the illustration. And anything that's like incidental is just meh. It's not important to him. Yeah. It's silhouettes of soldiers and the mist of gun smoke and like the hint of a tree on the horizon, and that's it. And it works so beautifully, and he puts only the work he needs to into the illustrations to tell the story.
There are a lot of other visual influences, a lot of them French, particularly the CGI, there's just a lot more going on, kind of more daring in that market, than student film and independent stuff that was on our Pinterest board, if you will. There were things that we were, but it was like for key things. Like I love the way that they use light through leaves, right? In this piece, or it was kind of selective like that. It wasn't like there wasn't a particular person who was like everything that artist does we're gonna emulate. It wasn't that. It was really pieces and parts. Other design questions.
A question?
Yes.
So in my personal work, I do experience design consulting for like companies and stuff. And so when I think about bringing teams together for something like this, where I don't have the wealth of knowledge about this type of craft of design, but I find I'm just extremely curious about the process of bringing people together through this process when you have painters and just everyone involved. What are some tools that were really helpful in that process? I know in my world there's like Google Design Sprints and things like that. I'm just curious from that perspective.
You first.
For me, as a producer, I'm looking for just, part of, I was going to say the other side of that conversation when I reach out to an artist, I try to use key words or reference points that will either go, and they get it, echolocator, or they'll come back with a bit of gobbledygook, and I'll go, not the right one.
Right.
Like it's a bit of a check, right? If he had come back with, never heard of Chesterton, okay, that's fine, but and who's this Lewis guy, or whatever. We'd be like, okay, we got a problem. But it's that.
Yeah.
I'm also then, Instagram and Pinterest, really, being able to just look at who's doing evocative work. I think one of the things that, again, if Andrew was standing here, we would say that really drew us to Nicholas's work in this case was the evocative nature of some of the things that he had already published. And then, of course, when he approached ours was that, wow, I want to go there. It made me want to participate in that space. It's that kind of, so it's really, for me, it's emotionally driven. And then I'm also looking for professionals, frankly. I mean, I've been in this business a long time, and I've had the joy of working with, young students, and they're fine. But you just put up with a lot of figuring stuff out, and so I wanted to find a professional that could, get into it, because it is a collaborative and a fighting business. I mean, we end up arguing through things a lot, and you have to be sturdy enough to take that, and so that's some of that.
Great Nostril War of 2016.
The Great Nostril War.
We had a long series of discussions about how much nostril characters should have, especially the children. And I'm team minimum nostril. I'm this is not about their nostrils. This is very technical, but once you get into starting to define super physical characteristics about it, you get slowly drawn into that uncanny valley of they have nostrils, but they don't have any holes in their ears or whatever. This all this kind of stuff. And Chris, of course, was sort of rightfully kind of advocating for a nose has holes in it. That's what a nose is.
Just give me a shadow. Just little
So it's thrilling. We get a lot of really exciting conversations.
All right. Do you want to say anything about that one?
Sure. I think just with by bringing me onto the project, you brought me and everyone I know.
Sure. Yeah. That's also the collaborative nature of. I will say the quality of the project is key. I have recruited artists plenty of times that when you tell them what project you're on, they're like, yeah, I'm busy, got a thing, I just got a call, I'm out. And right? Because I'm not giving you anything that you're all that excited about. And in this case, I knew we had something pretty catnip for the right people.
Yeah.
Right? And so that was really the test too, is if you like the things we're saying here, then we're gonna have a lot of fun together. This is a really cool project. Especially if you've come out of having to work on a number of projects that you were killing your soul for. They're like, I can't believe I'm making this. Keith would say that about some of the projects that he went through with Valve, the game company. There was stuff he did there that he's just like, this is the worst. I don't think I'm helping humanity at all, you know.
Yeah.
And so when you have something that's more redemptive and interesting in this, it's really wonderful. And then you're looking for sympathetic souls, you know. And so in this case, once Nicholas was in and in passionately, it was easy phone calls for him to say, hey guys, want to check us out?
Yeah, and I'll make those phone calls for something I believe in, and I won't for something that I don't.
Yeah, and I know that too on this end. I know, hey, do you know any other artists? And he's like, no, buddy. He doesn't like the project, right? That's what that families do. And you just go, I got it, no problem. Because I've done the same. You know, this is kind of how you do it. We have one more hand back, and we get
What's at this phase? What's sort of your team size? And,
small as possible.
Yeah, as small as possible. Is it basically 2 guys?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this, because when you're in biz dev, this is frankly where a lot of the larger studios spend a lot of money because they're shopping, trying to find the thing they want to make, right? A unicorn, farts butterflies, right? They got to spend a while trying to figure that out. And you get a lot of really beautiful, evocative art because they're trying to find the story. In this case, we had the story, right? So we could have a relatively small team because we were trying to just kind of blow on this fire to try to get this story to life visually, and just need a couple people.
How long did that process take?
Long time. In fact, I was looking at the time date stamps here. The house came in September of 16, you know, and we officially started production on the animation side in January, February timeframe, 17. So there's an old production triad, good, fast, cheap, and we knew we could be good and cheap, but we just couldn't be fast. And we were comfortable with that because thankfully the Kickstarter backers had given us resources that could sit in an account, and we didn't have an investor that was on us to pay back, and we could make a lot of really careful choices and just take as much time as we needed. And so we kind of had the luxury of, like what a lot of large studios have, of 3 to 5 years to kind of work through a project. We've been able to do that so far, which we're just so thankful for, that we can take our time to really make, for a relatively small team, because normally you'd have to really ramp up the meter and it gets very expensive, and so in our case we could all keep day jobs and other things while moving this thing somewhat aggressively along.